Hello and welcome back to another episode of KSP POV, where we launch and manage rockets all in first person. Today is the second episode, and we are going to be launching quite a few different rockets for different purposes. We're going to be doing some contracts. This is kind of just the necessary steps to get our program up and running. Went ahead and took the contract for entering into space, because that is definitely something we're capable of doing. At least entering into space. Orbiting is going to be a different idea, but that is going to be the goal for today, is to get at least one craft orbiting around Kerbal. So first I'm going to just make a little science probe. Just get as much as I can, because again, this is early game, so we have to grind out as much science as possible. I'm setting up my action groups, and that includes the arming of the parachute and all the different sciences for the different areas. And I'm only bringing one science junior, so I have to really pay attention to where I'm going to be putting it. This is the Champagne Namer mod that gave us the silly little name. That is Machine Dragon, APR. The names are really random, and probably will end up leading to some confusion when I'm trying to load crafts or reuse crafts. Again, I have the clicking glitch where it makes it really hard to click things in the VAB. I don't know, or just in craft construction in general. So I don't know what that's all about. Alright, so now we're ready to launch. This is going to be suborbital. And I'm having to really work within the parts limit. That's why I had to go and remove the upper stage that would have potentially been able to bring us to orbit. But no, 30 parts is pretty difficult. But that's the fun of career mode, is it forces you to think outside the box. So now we're just going up. Very thankful for the whole cams mod, being able to just have some kind of visual idea of what's going on outside the craft. I am missing some information, I'm not sure why, but that's what all those ends are. And of course, this is early game Kerbal Space Program, so rockets will be flipping this way and that. They just don't have the control that later versions have, and that's like later versions of the engines have better control, and later versions of reaction wheels. Like, I even put a reaction wheel on this, and that might actually be the only reason why we didn't flip over completely, but definitely a lot of flipping with this rocket. Yeah, and there's another flip. I'm not really too concerned as long as I'm able to save the science from this. I'll consider that a successful mission. I wasn't able to get into high space with this, but we still managed to make our craft exit the atmosphere. So that's a win in my book. And apparently it's a win in Kerbal's book as well, because I go ahead and complete that enter into space contract, and nice little separation right there. I go ahead and start to point retrograde because that's the way you should do it, but then I realized I would have lost my view of Kerbal, and I figured I'll just wait a little bit. I can always point retrograde on the way back down. So now I'm just time warping until it's time to do the experiments. And I do it just slightly too soon. it was still in the atmosphere right there. That's why the experiments didn't yield anything. So time to point retrograde and come back home. And we just quickly zoom towards the surface, and the parachutes deploy correctly. They were successfully staged. Staging parachutes using the Real Shoot mod is very immersive, I feel. So yeah, this button doesn't actually do anything, but it makes a nice little noise. It's fun. So every now and then I press it to pretend like it actually does recall the vessel. So I go ahead and take the general construction tab, because it gives us access to the service bay and fairings. The fairings will be great because we'll keep everything aerodynamic on the way up, but the service bay is really what I'm after here, because I can store my science safely and not have to worry about them being ripped off the craft as we re-enter the atmosphere. So this little service bay you see with the two mystery buoys on the side, the other experiments in the center, and then batteries with the magnetometer room, that's going to be a very common service bay, science service bay you'll see, at least in the beginning parts of the game. But you'll be seeing that even as we're making moon landings, kind of that same setup. Sometimes we'll be in set to 4 if I'm really going to be grabbing some science. So what I'm doing here is I'm making just a little KSP lander. This isn't meant to go into high atmosphere at all. This is just to get from the launch pad to a different part of the KSP. I'm not even aiming specifically for any particular part. I just want to get to a different part of it and then collect all the science from that area. And the engineers assure us that it'll be safe and successful, and the parachutes are good. And even if they aren't good, we'll be able to manually burn. So go ahead and turn over to the west a little bit. Right above the stations. Then I deploy my chute. And I'm going pretty fast. And I'm not very high above the ground. And I'm not pointed retrograde. And all of these things add up to a successful landing onto the lip of the VAB, and then a large plummet back down to the earth, or to the Kerbal soil. It's going to be spinning a lot in that top part of the screen, so if motion sickness is your thing, maybe don't look at that spot, just look at one of the other things down in the lower spot. And the craft is landed, and I go ahead and do the science for the area, and then it spins and just keeps spinning and it keeps spinning. Some say it's still spinning to this day. Alright, so that yielded us quite a bit. Gave us a cool 66.6 science. And we go ahead and take that and just look through the science tabs to see what we're going to get. We end up landing here on aviation, and that gives us access to wheels, which is going to be helpful, and we're going to be able to use that to make our first Rover. That's going to be good. It's going to be more useful in later spots. So I go ahead right now and upgrade the mission control, so now I can take more contracts. And I go ahead and do so. I take a couple parts testing contracts. Now just back into the AAB, I'm going to go ahead and work on one of those contracts right now. So the first one is just to haul the solid rocket booster up to a certain spot, and then the other one is to test the decoupler at a certain altitude and speed. I'm gonna go ahead and get my screen set up, the usual format with a vessel view on the right and kind of external camera in the center. Sometimes that's orbit. My resources on the left. I just realized I never really explained any of this. And then I have my nav ball in the bottom left, and then I have orbital information in the bottom right. However, for some reason, I'm glitching out and not having all the information in the orbital tab. What I was shaking my finger or my mouse at right there was the fact that we had successfully completed the contract and we still had plenty of fuel. However, we're not going to be able to make the second contract because we explode before we could reach the desired parameters. But we successfully did the first contract, so we're going to go ahead and just live with that. So now I'm just looking at more contracts to have, because now that I've opened up 7 spots for contracts, it's a waste to not have something to be working on. So this was another attempt at the decoupler contract. And I also am at the last minute decided to throw on the scan camera, target scanner camera, to complete another contract as well, where we just run it above the shores. Very easy. And now that stage button isn't actually doing anything, but I do enjoy the idea of clicking it, and so I click it at the same time that I press the space bar. So it's the illusion of it working, but I think it's fun. I just wish there were a few patches to this mod just to make some of the unfunctional buttons functional. This is really good. I love this mod. All the IVA mods, for that matter. And I'm happy to admit that it's not going to be too long until we start doing manned missions, and we can use different capsules instead of just the same room. So I end up overshooting the parameters, and I'm not able to get my speed at the right speed in time, and so I'm not going to be able to complete that contract. So I go ahead and bring myself back down to the planet. And each of these launches are going to be furthering us in some way, either through contracts or through science, or even through milestones of first crafts to do certain things. And so it's tedious launching these crafts, especially if they end up burning up or you know, failing the contract parameters. It's all part and parcel of the experience of KSP. And since this is a Let's Play instead of just you know, a design series or something, I think part of that is bringing you all along on the journey and seeing, you know, what it takes to get to those grand missions. And then once we do get to those grand missions and we're going to different planets and stuff, it'll be much more gratifying for all of us because we'll have gotten there together. So I completed one contract, so I go ahead and grab more. Grab the orbiting Kerbal contract. And then I decide I don't normally do these things, but I decided we need to make sure that we have enough money because soon we're going to be setting up our satellite network, our communications network, and those aren't going to be completing practically any contracts. I do have one to set that up, and then that will get us a little bit of money, but I don't think it's going to be enough money to be equivalent to the amount of money that we spent just setting up the network. So I want to go ahead and find some way of adding cash to it. So what I do is I do whatever these things are called. I can't remember what they're called, but I trade reputation for money. So every contract, I take a little bit less reputation gain than I would have gotten, but I get more money for it. And I think that's a fair trade-off because I don't think reputation is all that necessary. Like, you know, I don't normally get into a low reputation because, yeah, I will fail some things, but the overwhelming majority of stuff I end up getting positive reputation from it, so any hits to the reputation are kind of negligible. Yeah, so now having to work within the parameters of the parts limit and as well as the weight limit, because those first two boosters that I put on were too heavy. So yeah, tiny little heat shield, because that's all I have access to at the moment, but it's better than nothing. Setting up my action groups. We gotta make sure I have enough battery to last the journey because this is gonna be heading high up into space, hopefully. So we use the vessel namer mod to name this the AmpYear Whisker Heart. I don't know what that means, but that's what this rocket is. We may end up not using that mod later on when we start building bigger and more complicated crafts because we're going to want to know kind of exactly what we're dealing with, but for now it's kind of fun. And again, I like the idea that the engineers got together and pitched some ideas for the name of the rocket, like, because that's what it says in the mod description, is that those who worked on the rocket have suggestions. So yeah, so now it's just a typical ascent. I'm just turning ever so slightly. In the beginning, we don't really have the luxury of dramatic gravity turns. We have to just ever so slightly give ourselves an angle and then just kind of ride with it until later. We got a clean separation right there. and then starting to fire the main thruster, because those side boosters were good enough to get us that high. They had good thrust weight ratio, so didn't even have to have the center tank firing at all. They were going pretty hot through the atmosphere. So at the very last minute, I remembered to do the science to satisfy one of those contracts right there that you see in green, target scanning. And it's basically at the last moment, because I think I did it right before I started heading into outer space. And so we went ahead and completed those two contracts as well. The enter into space and reach for the stars, which is basically the same thing, just from two different they're two different contracts, because I have a contract mod pack installed, contract configurator. I don't know. Mods will always be in the description below. I am thinking I might actually end up making a Google document and organizing them there that would also include the version numbers that I'm using, and potentially links to the mods, but I'm not sure. I do most of my mods through CCAN, so honestly that is what the best recommendation that I have for anyone who's going to be modding is to use the mod manager, CCAN, and if not, use, I guess, CurseForge if you have to, but unless you really know what you're doing, using a mod manager is the best advice. So yeah, so now we're just coming back in the atmosphere, and because the flags for some reason are like windows into where the craft goes, I get to see the fire through there because the camera is not working, so that I have no visual cue that I'm actually on fire. But I do have this flight log that shows me all the things that were destroyed coming through, and that is basically all the science I have. But I managed to get my parachute deployed, and I'm safely bringing home a probe core with a couple batteries in there. It's something, you know. In career mode, every dollar counts, and so can't complain too much because we're at least getting something back. But go ahead and chalk this up as a failure. But it was not enough science. That's right. I don't have enough science yet. I really want to upgrade the VAP. This part limit is killing me. I need to figure out somehow to do that. So now we're going to take a step aside from the contracts and work on our satellites. We're going to do the first one I'm going to be working on is a scan sat. That radar dish at the top is going to be scanning the surface of the planet and giving us information about the altitude, the altimetry of the planet. And it's a low resolution, so it's going to be very crude, very basic, but it's a start, and we'll be able to use that information going forward. So I wasn't exactly happy with how I built it, and again, it was the part limits was a little too much, but I went ahead and saved it anyways and tried to reproduce it again, just keeping within the part limits this time. I'm not sure why I decided to scrap the rocket and redo it. Oh, I remember why. It's because I was having the clicking glitch and I wasn't able to click on the part to redo it. So the workers decided to name this one the Fluffy Pathfinder, and I'm starting to doubt their abilities for naming, regretting giving them that power. But here we are, the Fluffy Pathfinder, and it will pathfind fluffily. Okay, go ahead and launch, and we are going to be going in polar orbit. So that means we're going to be heading north. Because anytime you're dealing with scan stats, polar orbits are going to be ideal, because with a polar orbit, it will pass over every part of the planet at some point. So everything is able to be scanned. So now I'm spinning out a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. I think it has to do with the solid rocket booster probably not having any gimbaling. But the wings have control surfaces and gimbaling. Not gimbaling, but control. So it has control. So I'm able to correct around, and that's why I'm not just flipping over and over again, end over end, with no control. So, but once again, it was a wild ride, as early KSP always is. So I did do a little bit of a flip, but I managed to kill the engine and then restart the engine in the right space, and so I was able to regain control. And now this is a little bit of a long episode today. I was probably going to end it here after this mission, but the next one that I ran directly after that was worth sticking into this one. I feel like it gave it a good ending, and so I decided to do this. Once again, I recorded a bunch of footage all at once, so the first like 3 or 4 episodes are all going to be from the same recording session, and so that's why I do eventually kind of fix the NAN glitch on the screen that gives the information, but that doesn't get fixed for a while, so I'm going to be dealing with that glitch for the next few episodes. Also, if anybody has any comments about anything that I might be doing incorrectly or have any advice about that, I will see it, I will read it, and I will respond to the comments. I just won't be able to implement them until we're more caught up on the episodes. So I burned through all of my fuel and I'm not able to make it into orbit. I do manage to see the North Pole, and that's fun. And the communication dishes get ripped off by the aero forces. But surprisingly, the heat doesn't burn me up on the way back in. But of course, what the heat doesn't do, the gravity will finish. But of course, we're owning our mistakes, so we're not going to be reverting. We're just going to have to eat the cost of that rocket. So yeah, so go ahead and upgrade the launch pad, and I upgrade the VAB. So now rocket size is not a concern, and we can do everything that we need to do. So yeah, like I said, this was probably where I was going to end the episode after upgrading the VAB, but I decided I wanted to do just one more attempt at orbit. So here I am just grabbing a little bit of extra science. I'm not even making a rocket. I'm literally just taking a probe and throwing experiments on it so I can run those experiments at the island runway, because that too is its own biome and we haven't been there for science at all. So I'm just collecting what I can, and hopefully that is enough, and it was enough. So now I was able to unlock fuel systems, and that is going to be a huge boon. The fact that we have more than 30 parts, more than 18 tons, and we have fuel lines, we are about to start vamping up our space abilities. So yeah, so now I'm throwing on some lights, I'm throwing on an extra tank, like I am feeling comfortable with my part limit now, so I can afford the better things. Like with 30 parts, there's no way I'm gonna put lights on there, are you kidding me? But of course having lights on a satellite that goes in the dark is very important, especially if you're doing it in IVA mode, first person mode, because any cameras that you put on there are gonna need light to see. So now the Fluffy Pathfinder 2 is ready for launch, and this one should be good enough to reach orbit. The side boosters with the fuel lines into the center tank and alone is going to be able to get us much farther than we had before. Our thrust to weight ratio is very low. It is above 1, but it's very low, so that's why it's such a slow takeoff. But as it gains altitude and loses fuel, of course, the thrust to weight ratio will climb. And so I'm not too worried. What would worry me is if it drops below 1 after the side boosters are separated. Because then we'd be coming back down. You know, if we never leave the launch pad, that's not a terrible thing, because we can just kill the engines, recall the rocket, and rebuild it so that way the thrust is better. But if we're already to the second stage and we're several kilometers up, it's not gonna be good. Yeah, once again, just a casual climb. In later episodes, I'll probably cut and skip through a lot of the ascension because it's going to be a lot of the same stuff. Not when I do in command pods. In command pods, I'm going to show a lot more of what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to explain a lot more of what I'm doing. And maybe in the next couple episodes, I'll kind of really break down what some of these screens are doing, or maybe I'll just do a whole episode where I just go through button by button and show you what everything does, if that is something that people want to see. So yeah, I'm just still climbing. Got plenty of delta V left. I'm starting to head more horizontally, getting more speed to escape the pull of Kerbal's gravity. Yeah, so my time to apoapsis was dropping, and so what I did is I decided to point my nose. There is no up in space, but I decided to point my nose up, so away from the planet, away from my prograde, and so it was able to start being enough to raise my prograde, or my apoapsis. And so now we're just running out of fuel in the lower stage, but we're looking good as far as our trajectory goes. We should definitely be able to make orbit. And as you see, this is why I wanted to include this in this episode, because we did so much testing and all these different launches and trying to get to space and making it to space but not being able to make it to orbit. I wanted to be able to have a solid win, a solid orbit by the time the episode ended. I have no idea what those lines are. I thought that was pretty interesting. I've never seen that before. So yeah, so our engine is out. So I go ahead and fire the next one. So that way we can bring our orbit fully circularized. So now we're up at 80 kilometers above the planet. So, and now we're in space. So we go ahead and stage the fairing and deploy all of our pieces. I still don't have proper satellite solar panels on this. I also don't have very powerful communication dishes. So this is going to be obsolete very soon, this satellite. And once we get access to the Breaking Ground DLC seismograph, then we're going to start decommissioning our satellites and bring them back into the planet and hopefully smash them against the planet and get some science from that. Most of the time, and yeah, as you see, our periapsis has now exceeded the planet's atmosphere, and so we are in orbit. Our very first orbit, everybody. And we did it on episode 2. So yeah, and I still have plenty of Delta V left, a lot of fuel left, so I can do things with this if I need to. So I am scanning. I'm scanning the surface right now. That's why you can see the little cone of view right there, the little blue triangle coming out of the satellite. Yeah, so our scan has started, and we are going to be gathering information about our planet. We're going to be gathering information about every planet because the prime goal of this series is exploration. We're going to be seeking out the stars, or not the stars, but the planets, because one of the mods we have hides all the planets from us. We can only see Kerbin, the Sun, and the Mun. We have to go and send out telescopes and use our observation deck. The mod adds an observation building into the KSC. We have to use that to figure out where Minmus is, where Duna is, where all the planets are. We have to research and do exploration to figure it out. So now all I want to do before I close out is just circularize this a little bit, make sure that we're in the right height, the best altitude for the scan. And as you see, we are very alone. Well, that's where I'm going to call today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.